Before we get started though, any questions about anything just in general? Or class related, not class related, I don't care either way. Okay, well, let me pass this out then to you guys here. And for you guys that are on Zoom, hopefully, like I say, you got the copy of this in the email that I sent out. But if not, then you'll just have to hang this for a minute. What's that? So I need it at least one time. I don't need necessarily tell you.
Okay, I'll teach.
Okay, yeah, if you got it. Great. All right. So for you guys on Zoom, let me. I will share the screen that shows it, but for what we're going to do right off the bat, you kind of need a printed copy. So if you're on a computer, for you guys that are on Zoom, I can throw into the chat box a copy of this, so I'll do that so you can print it off if you need to. But
the Oregon contract is 13 pages, so I'm really looking forward
Oh,
to
yeah?
6 pages of signatures. Yeah.
all right, so here's what we're going to do though is so for you guys that are here with me, what I want you to do is I've given you a copy of a purchase contract, and the first page has the MLS on it. What I want you to do is go through and find all the errors that are in there. So go through each of them and find what you think is potentially an error. And then what we're going to do, so we'll take probably, I don't know, 15-ish minutes, however long it takes for you guys
Just
to
the
get
contract,
through.
right?
Just the contract.
Not
Yeah.
the printout.
Yeah, don't worry about the printout, just the contract. And then what we will do is,
Oh, we're using the printout for the contract.
yeah,
For the offer.
correct. Yep.
Okay.
So for you
I'm
guys that are
sorry.
on Zoom, I did just throw one into the chat box for you, if you want to try to use that.
So we're finding errors like discrepancies or just errors in the contract.
So in the boxes where the agent would have filled out, what I wanted you to do is go through and find kind of the mistakes that they've made in filling it out. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And then we'll
It's an
go.
offer on its own, right?
Yeah, and it's an offer. Yeah, so think of it, I guess this is the way I want you to think of it. Assume you are the listing agent, and not that you necessarily have to, like that it has to have your name as the listing agent, but what I want you to do is assume you're the listing agent. And so as the listing agent, you've now just received this offer on your property. And what I'm wanting you to do is go through and find, like, what are the mistakes? What are the things that the agent who filled this out did wrong or should have maybe done a little differently or whatever? And then we'll go through and talk about it. So the idea of this is on Friday, Rob did the REPC class. So he went through with the REPC with you guys. And the idea of this now is we're going to deal more with the, how do you fill it out? So Rob was doing more of the, like, here's what the contract says kind of a thing, or how it works. Today's more of like, how do you fill it out? And how do you know what to put in different areas? Now, and actually, real quick, what I will give you on that is the background on that is the failure rate in real estate is one of the highest in terms of any profession that's out there. And the only thing actually that has a higher failure rate than real estate is multi-level marketing, believe it or not. Like that's like that.
I didn't
That
know
was
that was like counted in the same category.
no, it's not the same category. But
No, I mean, like, I didn't know that multi-level marketing would be counted as a career.
oh yeah, gotcha. Yes, I see what you're saying. But so what I have found though is, because I've spent over the last 15 years training agents and specifically new agents, what I have found is the thing that holds them back the most, the thing that stops people from being successful is the fear of, if I get a client and I have to sit down and do this, do I know how to do it? Because in real estate school, did they teach you how to sell real estate?
No.
What did they teach you?
I'm not going to.
That's right. Essentially, here's how you pass the test and stay out of jail. And so the idea then for me, so my objective is, what I want to do is go through the contract today in a way that you would feel comfortable sitting down with a client and filling it out and knowing that, hey, I kind of know what to do, if that makes sense. So yeah, so if you'll just take the next, however long it takes you to go through it, go through the contract. In fact, if you want to rip the first page off, a lot of times that's what people will do, is pull that first page off and you have it as a reference. But just go through that, find what mistakes, circle them or whatever, and then we'll go through and we'll talk about each of those. So hopefully you guys on Zoom either had a copy already or could get the one out of the chat box. If for some reason though you're on a phone on Zoom, you won't be able to see it in the chat box. I don't know why that is, but. Okay, cool. Thanks, Sean. I just saw your text. I don't know if you're still on there, but. Oh, he's gone. So for you guys on Zoom, once you're done, if you'll throw it in the chat box that you're done, and then I'll just kind of keep an eye on everyone here. And once we have pretty much everybody done, then we'll go through it. All right, looks like we're getting close. So maybe 2 minutes, we'll get started. All right, anybody want more time? Okay. And you guys want lights on or off? All right, here we go. Okay, so what we're gonna do now then is just walk through this, and like I said, ideally, or not ideally, I shouldn't say ideally. The intention is mostly to go through and just talking about the filling it out sections, meaning that I don't plan to spend a whole lot of time on sections that don't have anything to be filled out. Now, with that being said, though, I also want to answer questions and things that you guys have. So as we go through, if I skip over a section that you do have questions and want to talk about, then just ask and we'll stop and talk about it. But for the most part, my plan is just go talk about the fill in the blank area. But as I said, I really do want to answer questions and help you, because the objective for me on this is for you to be comfortable with filling out the purchase contract and knowing how to do it is really the objective, okay? So with that, so let's jump in and go through this. So the first section on here that we have put anything into is right here on this 9th day of October 2017 here. But the thing that I want to point out to you is notice right here that it says offer reference date. And so clearly the thing you're going to put in there for the date is going to be whatever date you're filling out the contract, right? So like that's simple. But the reason I want to talk about this is notice that after that, in parentheses, it's got offer reference date. The idea of that is there are other places throughout the contract, specifically on addendums or counteroffers, that it's going to have you fill in the offer reference date. And a lot of times what agents will do is they'll put in the date that the contract was accepted or signed or whatever as the offer reference date. But I just want to make sure you guys are clear and know going forward, anytime that it asks for the offer reference date on, if you're filling out an addendum, a counteroffer or anything like that, this is the date that you're gonna put in there. Because on an addendum or a counteroffer, it's saying that offer, or excuse me, that counteroffer or that addendum is in reference to the purchase contract with the reference date of, and then whatever date you put in here is what should then go on the addendum or the counteroffer. Make sense? Okay. Next, we get to the buyer. So in this case, we've got Billy Bob Buyer. So part of what I'm going to do is as we go through this, is I'm just going to, when we get to each section, I'm going to ask you guys any concerns with that. So do you have any concerns with the name Billy Bob Buyer? Okay.
Is buyer supposed to be there, or like, are they saying like my name and then buyer on the end? 'Cause
No, Yeah, sorry, no, I just did it as if that was his name, so
Okay,
first,
yeah.
middle, and last name, so yeah, good question.
Okay, so I was gonna say the same, like you definitely should have.
Yeah, I was
buyer
like, yeah,
and
you
seller
should put
about
buyer
that.
after.
Yeah,
the
you
name,
said the buyer family.
Yes, yeah, this is the buyer family,
Buyer
or whatever,
number
so,
Okay.
yeah, good question, so, and I hadn't thought of that when I put it there, but that is probably a
Like a
good
trick
thing to
question.
put there to
Yeah.
trick you, to say, yeah, no,
That
it's,
was good.
yeah.
On purpose.
Okay, so now the next question though is, where do I get, and this might sound like a little bit of a duh question, but I don't think it really is, so I want to just ask it anyway. What if his name really isn't Billy Bob Buyer? What if it's William Robert Buyer? So how do I know what name to put in there?
Yeah.
Ask.
Okay, ask him.
Verifying a federal or state ID.
Okay, so with some ID, okay, good, so all of those are okay answers. Here's how I want you to think about is the name you're gonna put in on the contract there should match how they applied for the loan.
Oh.
So any of your answers is fine, as long as that's how they applied for the
Well,
loan.
and if they're, I always make sure to ask if they're in the trust, too, if they're purchasing it with the trust.
Yeah, so, which is a good point, but pretty rare, that's not totally true, but I'm gonna say it anyway. Pretty rare that when they're purchasing, in the name of the trust. And why I say that is, and probably a better way of saying it is, if they're getting a loan, the trust, it is unlikely the trust is gonna get a loan.
The only times it's happened to be cash.
That's what I was gonna say. So if it's cash, and so here's the good news, because you're right on. In the event they're purchasing with cash, you can put whatever you want there. Like they could put whatever name that they want to put on there. Okay, go ahead, Christian.
Well, first of all, if it's two people applying jointly, it's both names.
Correct.
Well, I have a question. What if it's somebody that's, okay, what if, when this happened before, what if my wife and I are applying, but I'm doing it on her behalf using a power of attorney?
Okay,
So
so,
do I just put my name on there?
so
That's
no,
part of it.
great question.
Well,
So if you were gonna be purchasing this and you were doing it on her behalf with the power of attorney, as you're saying, then basically
still
how.
both of us, because
Yep.
I'm just her attorney. in
Yep,
fact.
that's right. You're gonna
Okay.
put both names on there, but then when you sign it, you're gonna sign it as
Twice.
you would sign it as your name,
Yeah.
and you would sign it as your name, attorney in fact,
Yep.
and put her name, yeah. So good question. All right, so really, the main thing I want you guys to remember and take away from this section is find out how they've applied for the loan. So if you're working with the client, and one of the first questions you want to ask is, have you applied for the loan when you're filling this out? Now, hopefully you already know, but in the event for some reason, like you were holding an open house, somebody walks in and says, I want to buy the house right now, and you pulled out a contract and start to fill it out. If you don't already know, you want to find out, have you applied for the loan and what's the name that you did? Because the other thing that comes up is maybe it's a husband and a wife buying the house, but only he's the only one going to be on the loan. But sometimes they're like, yeah, but I want her to be on title, so I want her name on the contract. Well, again, if it's cash, you can do just about whatever you want. But if they're getting a loan, the mortgage company is only going to want to see the name of the buyer being who is applying for the loan. So if they're wanting to add her after the fact, they can do that. Is that weird?
No, I was going to say, so like, what I usually do is just go off the name on the pre-approval letter.
Perfect.
Is that?
Yep, that works. Yep. And that's what I was going to say. If they've given you a pre-approval letter, whatever the name is on there is what will, because
Yeah,
that's
even
how
if
they've
it's a
applied. for
husband
it.
and wife, if it's just a husband, then you just put the husband.
Yep, correct.
So just a question, you said that if somebody walks into an open house and wants to buy a house, shouldn't that person, or could that person have an agent that will do that for them?
It's possible. But if they walk in, if somebody walked in and said to me, hey, I like it and I want to buy it, will you write the offer for me? I'm going to say, okay.
Even if they have an agent?
But what do you ask if they had an agent first?
So when I would ask, so we'll talk about this actually on Tuesday when we do the buyer packet, we'll talk more about this.
Okay.
But I don't worry about asking somebody so I probably better back up. What I was about to say, you guys are gonna misinterpret, so I'll back up and say it. When I worry about if somebody has an agent is when I'm filling out the buyer broker agreement or writing an offer. So yes, and our code of ethics, so when you guys went to training at the board, when you got your license, one of the things they told you is you need to ask if they're working with an agent as soon as you meet them. I mean, is that
Yes.
essentially what they taught you?
Contact, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not true.
What?
No,
Ethically, it's not.
no, not even ethically. Our code of ethics in article number 16, which deals with us working with other agents and not stealing their clients, basically. What it says, our code of ethics actually, so they don't train it this way to you at the board, and I'll tell you why I think they don't in a minute. But what our code of ethics actually says is you have to ask if they're working with an agent prior to providing a substantive service. And then in parentheses, it says writing an offer or presenting a CMA. So to answer your question, Luz, if I'm going to do this, the first thing I'm going to do is have them sign a buyer broker with me. And the reason I'm going to do it that way is because section 5 is a confirmation that you've already done it. So the first thing I'm going to do is the buyer broker. On the buyer broker, there's a section that says in there that, and we'll talk about this on Tuesday, but there's a section in there that says one of the responsibilities of the buyer is to tell other agents when they come in contact with them that they're working with an agent.
But if they don't?
If they don't, so that, I guess what I'm saying is if somebody walks in and says to me, I want you to write an offer for me, I'm going to say, great, I'm going to pull out the buyer broker. I'm going to start to go through the buyer broker. In the process of that, I'm going to ask them, have you signed this before with anybody? And if they say no, which by the way, less than 2% of the time. Now, our company, I think, is an exception to what I'm about to say, but less than 2% of the time, if you're talking about nationwide, do agents get a buyer broker signed before they write an offer? Very, very rare that people get a buyer
We
broker
usually
signed.
send it with.
They typically do it with this time of the offer.
Sorry, I'm getting a little bit confusing here.
Okay,
Because we had a class, what's his name? Oki, I'm trying to remember.
Rob Oki.
Rob Oki, and he was saying that when working with a buyer, the way he screens his clients is having them come to the office here.
Yep.
To fill the agreement,
Yep.
because he says people that don't, they are not serious working with you.
Mhm.
And then he says, because sometimes what happens, he says, an agent will say, oh, before I can show you any house, you have to have this broker agreement. And the client will just do it because they want to see the house, even though they are working with somebody else.
Right.
So I'm thinking right now, I'm not sure. I'm kind of confused about this.
And so I'm confused now of what you're confused about.
Well,
So-
what he was saying is that when he works with a client, he wants to screen his clients that they are working with him
Yes,
by having them coming here to the
Yes.
office.
okay,
Because he says, if you just find a client that just called you and they want to see that house, and you say, well, I cannot go until I have the broker agreement, they will just quickly do it just because they want to see the house.
okay,
No, but they might have a prior agreement with somebody else.
okay. So tell me what you're confused about.
Well, my concern is that if they have an agreement with somebody and I'm making a second agreement, I don't want to be messing up, like you're stealing my clients because they were working with me and now you did this with them,
Okay, good.
you know?
Yeah, so I am on I'm on the grievance committee now for the Salt Lake Board, but I'm on have been on the professional standards at the Salt Lake Board, and I'm currently on the professional standards for the Utah Association of Realtors. And what I will tell you is there's two different pieces of this. One side of it is there's procuring cause, meaning who's going to get paid for the client.
That's right.
And then there's a second part of it is the ethical side of it is you messed with my client and you shouldn't have been messing with my client kind of thing. So kind of keep that in mind that there's those two pieces. that just because somebody has signed a buyer broker does not mean you're entitled to a commission. So because if you're not the procuring cause, now well, let me rephrase that, because legally, as far as the state or the law would say, because of how the buyer broker is written, they do owe them a commission because they bought. But that doesn't mean they're going to get the commission that's paid by the seller on the home that they wrote an offer.
So how do they
Would
get
they
their
be getting a
commission?
referral?
What's that?
Would they be getting a referral?
Not necessarily.
Oh.
No. So what I'm saying is, when somebody signs a buyer broker agreement, that buyer is agreeing they will pay the agent a commission if they buy a house. If they then go buy one with a different agent, so let's say that they signed with me, but then they go and they walk into an open house or something that Chad's at, Chad for whatever reason goes out and shows them properties, writes an offer for them, it goes under contract, it goes all the way to closing, it closes. He might be entitled to the commission for that closing, but I am entitled from the buyer. So the buyer would then technically owe me a commission because they bought a house. But that doesn't mean I'm going to get the commission on the home that they bought. You following me?
Yeah, so what you're saying, he will get the commission from the seller,
Yes,
but you should get a commission
From
from
the
your
buyer.
client, from the buyer.
correct, correct. Now, there's another piece that you add to that, which says in our code of ethics is like, we shouldn't subject a client to paying a double commission. So then that's when you could potentially you could ethically go back to Chad and say, he violated the code of ethics because he took my client. But the problem is that whole thing is so messy that it might or might not be true that he stole the client. If the client feels like they've been abandoned, and I can't remember the other word now, it's abandonment or,
Ignored.
yeah, basically ignored, but
Neglected or-
there's a technical term for it. Basically think of it this way. If I, as the agent, abandoned them as a client, meaning I just quit calling them, I quit following up with them, so I've abandoned them, then if they went and bought a house with Chad, the board would look at it and say, I didn't do my job for my client, therefore,
Like an assumed agreement that you guys are like.
yeah. But let's say the client, for some reason, is the one who then says, I'm not going to use Russ anymore, and they go to Chad and say, I want to use Chad. Now, we'd have to see what's the reason that they decided they don't want to work with me anymore. And it could be something that is like, they asked me to write an offer for them, and I told them, no, I won't write an offer for you. Well, in that case, they could then say, okay, well, then we got to go find somebody that will. And in that scenario, then Chad wouldn't have interfered with their client because the client was either abandoned or the client, for whatever reason.
So.
No, it's not
okay.
neglected. There's
No.
another, it's more of a technical term. I can't.
So,
Anyway, if I think of it, I'll tell
so
you.
Ross, what happens if they come and they say in your open house, yes, I want to buy this house, but I have an agent.
Then okay, good. Yeah. So that's different. If they walked in and said, I want to buy this house and I have an agent, then I would say, great, call your agent and have them write the offer.
Okay,
And then, so what if they then said, well, I tried, but I couldn't get a hold of my agent?
Yeah.
Then I would probably say, okay, you should try to call their broker then. But so here's the thing, like there is a multiple of ways you can handle that. And part of it could be, I could say, great, let's write the offer. And then I sit down and write the offer for them. But again, let's say it was Chad's client and they said I couldn't get a hold of him. I could write the offer. And when I get to section 5, say, did you sign a buyer broker with him? Yep. Okay, well, let's put his name in there. And then I could do that. Like I could say to them, you got to go talk to the broker. You could go do nothing. Like, but at the end of the day too, if they just said, no, we can't get a hold of them and I'm not going to write it with them, I want it to do you, then I would say, great, let's do it. And I would just do it knowing there could be a possibility that Chad comes back and says, I'm entitled to that commission. You took my client. So you're just going to have to make the decision on your own of how you want to do it. Let me give you a quick story. Because that's more interesting than this stuff anyway, right? Is the stories. But I had an agent who came to me and said, hey, I've got these buyers. they want to, I actually am thinking of a told another story, but I'll stick with the first. But came to me and said, we've got these buyers, they want to buy, but they've signed a buyer broker, but they signed it for buying, and I can't remember for sure, but I want to say it was to buy fourplexes and above. So it wasn't signed for a duplex or a triplex or a single family home. Well, they don't like the agent anymore. And so now they're going to just go buy 2 duplexes instead of a fourplex, and they want to use me. So what should I do? And I said to the agent, well, based on what you've told me, if it's true, then go ahead and sign it for them if they're end up buying a duplex, and you can sign it, do it that way, go help them. And just know, so here's my point of the story is, I told the agent, just know you run the risk that at some point that other agent comes along and says, I'm entitled to the commission and I'm going to file for an arbitration. And that it's possible if that happens that you could end up losing the commission. So just know there may be scenarios like what we're talking about that you would have to say, I'm going to run the risk that I'm going to write the offer, do all the work, and then I'm not going to get paid for it at the end. But I also told the agent the chances of that are so small because it was kind of one of those abandonment issues where meaning like the clients they had signed it for a year and they hadn't heard from the agent in 6 months. And so they were kind of like, well, are we really obligated to them? And I just said, well, let's do it based on the fact of their agreement was for buying, a fourplex or larger. So, and I don't remember why they did it that way, but there was some weird reason they signed the buyer broker that way. And so the client went through, did it, bought it, they closed, and there was never an issue. But I just said to the agent, you just have to know somewhere along the way, if that agent gets wind of it, they're probably going to come back saying, I've got this agreement and, blah, blah, blah. So I guess just what I'm saying is you're going to have to sometimes just say, do I want to do it knowing that there might be an issue come up? But at the end of the day, for me, I always feel like, and again, having been on professional standards at the Salt Lake Board, whenever there's a dispute like that, if the client would show up and say, here's why I did what I did, and if it makes sense, then we said, okay, well, I can see why you did that. And we would then give the commission to the person based on that. So a lot of times the client coming in saying things makes a big impact on it. So somebody.
So let's say that the transaction closed like 6 months before, and then they found out they can't do anything because the commission's already did like.
Like a statute of limitations.
So, yeah, so, and
Or like
I don't
3
know that
months.
it's called statute of limitations, but essentially it's what it is.
So let's say.
It's 6 months.
Oh,
So,
okay.
but if 3 months
Let's say
later they
1 month.
came, if 1 month later, they could come back and say, I'm entitled to that.
Even though you already got the commission,
Uh-huh.
and you're like, you're bank and
Yep.
everything. Oh.
They could come back and say, I'm entitled to it. And then it would go to arbitration. The hard part is if it happened like even a month later, it's probably going to be like against you a little bit because to some extent it's like, how did you not know the whole time it was under contract? And like, I'm not saying it wouldn't work, but I would say it's less likely to work.
So in other words, you leave it to our discretion to see and then make a decision.
So yes, I'm leaving it to your discretion, but come and talk to us. Talk to Rob, talk to me, talk to any of the brokers in terms, hey, here's the scenario. What do you think? And like I said, there are many times that I say, hey, go for it, but just recognize that it could become an issue down the road. But if they truly have been abandoned, it's very unlikely that the agent shows up going, hey, what's going on? But if somehow they got word, oh, they're buying, because it was a referral from a friend and the friend's like, hey, I heard they're buying a house, like it could happen that they come back. But as long as what the client says is true, which in the code, I teach a code of ethics CE class. If you come to that, I'll tell you a scenario that fits all of this. That's way too long. I mean, it's way too long for what we're doing today. But where I say to you guys, who would you give the commission to? And we go through that. So, all right. So we good on the buyer. Cool. All right, 40 minutes and we've done one line.
We're trying to avoid getting in the hot water, right?
I know, right? That's just it. Like, here's the thing. We got to be here for a certain amount of time and we'll just get as much as we can. All right. Next then is so the buyer offers to purchase from Sally Sue Seller, which again, first, middle, last name, that's not, you know, you wouldn't put seller in there. Any concerns with that for you guys?
I just noticed that on MLS, it actually doesn't have the seller's name. So unless they ask the buyer, the agent for it, then they actually should just put owner of record.
Okay, good. So if you don't know and can't figure it out easily, it's fine to put owner of record. But here's what I recommend. For me, there are a few things that I think, no matter what, let me say it this way. No matter what, before you submit an offer, you should be calling the listing agent before you submit the offer, okay? One of the things I'd ask them when I call, if like in this case, it didn't have it, is I just ask them, what do you want? What is the seller name I should put on the contract? So, and I'll tell you the other things as we go through the contract, what I ask, but I am a believer of do not just ever send an offer without calling and communicating. Like tons of agents do that though. Just don't you be one of those, okay? All right, so that's where I'm typically gonna find it. You, again, similar to what we talked about the other day, you could go to the tax records and see what's on there. But again, it's not always 100% correct. So I usually just call and ask the listing agent. All right. Agrees to deliver earnest money of $1,000. Any concerns there? Okay, in the form of personal check number 567. Any concerns
Is
there?
it typical to write the check number on there?
No,
I've never seen that before, but it shouldn't be. I guess it's okay.
it's
And
okay.
It doesn't have to be a cashier's
Yeah,
check?
so here, I'll tell you why I have it done that way, and it doesn't apply so much in today's world, but when I first started, my broker had trained me because, you know, back then, every time we did it, it was always somebody was giving you a personal check for earnest money. And so I've left it this way just because in the event that you are in a scenario that somebody was to say, hey, let me give you a check, that this is the process I always did. So when I'm filling out the purchase contract and I would get to the earnest money section, I would always ask them how much they want to do, which they'll usually ask you, how much should I do? And so what's kind of the rule of thumb that you guys have been taught, or do you know?
1%.
How much?
1%.
Yeah,
Should, I mean, depending on the market, because like
Yeah.
earlier in the year, it was like 2 and even 3.
good, yes.
But then like, it just depends on the terms of your offer, because I say like, I bought a house 2 years ago and I put down $200 in earnest money.
Yeah.
Personal check.
Yeah, so that's just it. It's gonna vary depending on the market and the competitiveness and all those kinds of things. And the offer. So, but as a rule of thumb for the whole time that I've had my license, a good rule of thumb is 1%. So whatever the purchase price is gonna be, 1% is what you do there. So I would say to the client, how much do you wanna do for earnest money? They then say whatever, in this case, $1,000. What would happen is I would have always in the past, because we didn't have dot loop to electronically send to them. So we would meet them at the office, like Luz is saying, fill out the contract. And then I would say to them, great, how are you gonna pay it? And they would say check. And then I would say, perfect, what's the check number? And so the reason I always wrote the check number on there is because when I said to them, what's the check number? What do you think they had to do?
Give up the check.
Yeah, they usually, I mean,
Write the check.
yeah,
Yeah.
most of you guys don't even have a checkbook, right? But,
Of course.
but if you did, could you tell me the next check number that you're gonna write the check on? No.
Probably not even.
Yeah, and so I always said to the client,
Where's that at?
I couldn't tell you the last time I wrote a check either, by the way, but in fact, the last time I did, I don't even remember what it was for, but I went and I was like, I don't even know if I know how to fill this.
You don't pay for
Template I can look at.
your groceries with check?
No, I do not.
Not doing it right.
Although I don't go grocery shopping either, so my wife does all that, so, but
Oh, nice.
I know, she's good. So, but here's the thing. So for me, I would always say to them, what's the check number? And then they would immediately pull out their checkbook to tell me the check number, and then they would write the earnest money check. And so that's why I did it this way, but so
And it doesn't have to be a cashier's check?
No.
Okay. I mean,
But it
it's
can.
better.
depending, if you're gonna close quickly, then it does need to be an official check.
Right.
or a thing. Yeah. Yeah, that's the key thing to know is if they give us a check, a personal check, and then they cancel the contract, there is a 10-day hold on that money. They're not getting
Unless
it
they
back.
provide proof that it's-
Yeah.
So it's probably better to just suggest cashier's check. Since it's like
Or use Earnest.
Yeah, or ACH.
Use the earnest, okay, cool, all right, next, offer to purchase, any concerns on the property address here?
No.
So down here on property address, no concerns? No, okay. All right, so then we come down next, so like I said, I'm gonna skip over. And if you guys have questions, like seriously, stop me and let's talk about them. But otherwise, I'm gonna skip over the sections that don't have anything to check a box or put anything in. So, okay, section 1.2, concerns there.
No, the refrigerator is actually
Refrigerator.
excluded, not included.
Excluded, not included.
Yeah.
Okay, good, see, you guys fell for my trap, so perfect.
What?
In the remarks, it also says the hot tub's included, but I don't know if that's
Yeah.
personal property or if they're gonna throw it in.
Okay,
Oh,
good,
it was- Oh,
Good
they
catch.
just said it, yeah, it should be.
Is it excluded on the?
Christian?
Yeah.
Include,
The refrigerator.
yeah, this might not be it, but include in the included items, I mean, it covers things like plumbing and stuff like that, and then like, would you have to put, or would you want to put, I should say, that like, what is it, sprinkler system?
No, sprinkler system's covered.
You know
Is
what?
Cause it's like, that would be it's over in school, they did like a fixture versus a personal property.
Yeah, it's already in there.
It's already there,
It's like-
it's attached, yep.
It's attached, yeah.
The refrigerator,
All right, Chad's coming around, I like it.
the more I think about it, the refrigerator would be, MLS doesn't mean anything.
Perfect, that's exactly the discussion I wanted to have.
And so the refrigerator, even though it suggests that it's excluded on the MLS, it doesn't matter. So if they wanted to include the refrigerator, that's great. But if they wanted to exclude it, then that would be like an addendum or like a personal property type thing.
Well, if who wanted to.
If the seller wanted to leave it, just include the refrigerator, then it's fine, because the contract is going to uphold
Correct.
whatever people put their signatures on.
Yeah, because they might have had like.
But if they want to take it with them as an excluded item, then they would need to modify this.
Okay, good. Yeah, so are you guys on Zoom hearing all of this, or do I need to repeat what's we're saying? Are you even on Zoom? Is it a video of your face on there? You're not really there. Somebody unmute. What?
Repeat it.
Okay, that's why if, for you guys on Zoom, if you can't hear something, then I will always repeat. All right, so what Chad said, which is correct. And this is why I put it on there and did it this way, is the MLS says the refrigerator is excluded, but the contract here says it's included. Something to keep in mind is which one controls. The contract, right? The contract always is going to be, whatever the contract says is what is the governing document. But the reason I did this and put it on here is because you're going to have other agents though, that either call you later on and go, hey, we put on the MLS that the refrigerator wasn't included, so we're not leaving. Well, if it says on the contract in this, like it does in this case, that the refrigerator is included, it's included. And so you guys need to remember that as well, from the standpoint of just don't, a lot of times what happens with agents, especially again, if you're the listing agent, let's say that the seller said to you, I don't want to include the refrigerator. So you put it on the MLS as excluded. An agent writes an offer, sends it over to you. Here's what tends to happen though, is a lot of agents get the offer, and what's the first thing that you want to look at when you get an offer in? Purchase price. Why?
Because
That's what it's.
Yeah,
that's the
but-
most important for the seller, is what they.
Okay,
are
good.
looking at.
But for you, why do you look at it first?
Your commission.
Because you first want to see, am I going to get paid? Right? Like you're looking at it going, okay, is the seller going to be willing to accept this? What's the second thing you look at after you looked at the purchase price?
Earnest money.
No, you guys don't. Look at the earnest money.
The dates.
Yeah, the dates for what reason?
The deadline?
How fast?
Yeah, how fast it's gonna close.
Yeah, how fast how fast am I getting paid? And then everything else, you're like, yeah, we're good. As long as the price looks good and the date looks good, you're like, yeah, we're good. So let's go meet with the seller. So the reason I say that is just don't do just that. Then, I mean, yes, start with that. That's fine. I'm good with you starting with, am I gonna get paid and when? Yep, okay, good. I can make my Mercedes payments next month, so I'm good. Then they'll stop and look at, okay, what were the things that the seller wanted excluded and did they, because here's what happens if you don't. If you didn't catch it and you go to the seller and go, all right, hey, yeah, the offer, the price works, the date works, let's sign it. They sign it, they leave with the refrigerator. And then the buyer moves in and is like, hey, where's the refrigerator? And they call you, and where's the refrigerator? And you're like, oh, that was excluded on the MLS. Yeah, but well, it was on the contract, so you need to get your seller to put it back. So you call the seller and they're like, I'm not putting it back. I told you I wasn't keeping it. What typically happens is you end up paying for a refrigerator. So
I had my last listing in Oregon. We had the washer, I had the seller, we had the washer and dryer, obviously. Washer and dryer in the house, and they had written it into the contract, and I had to have junk removal come out to the house. And the junk removal people took the washer and dryer,
oh,
and they were not supposed to, so I called them and ripped them a new one, obviously, but I got them and put it back on myself.
oh, that's good. So for you guys on Zoom, she sold a property in Oregon. Junk removal took stuff they weren't supposed to take. And so she had to get it back. Okay. So here's the thing. The other thing to keep in mind is notice it says refrigerators, it's plural. And occasionally you'll come across with a seller that says, yeah, we'll leave the one that's in the basement or in the garage or whatever. We're taking the one that's in the kitchen. But notice this says refrigerators. So if that box is checked, it's including every refrigerator that's on the property.
So would you do other, you just counter offer?
So yeah, so that's the key is if you really don't want it, you're gonna have to do a counter offer to specify, we are going to leave the whatever LG fridge that's in the this and we're taking the whatever other kind of fridge it is. Make sense?
I have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
So it looks like they're gonna do a VA or an FHA loan. And I know that with VA loans, all appliances must be included. Is that correct?
I was gonna say, I'm not aware of that.
No, they don't.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I'm not aware of that being happened. Yeah, I'm not sure.
Well, that just happened on like, one of the last properties that I sold is that the range was missing. And so the VA loan, they were gonna have us, we didn't go with the VA loan offer.
Okay,
But that came up that just the certain stipulations for the types of loans, things that must be included.
yeah, so what you're saying is correct. Like, that doesn't mean the seller has to leave one, but you're right.
Yeah,
It has
there
to-
has to be
There has to be one in
a
that.
fridge.
Yeah. But as somebody said in here, section 1.1 does say that the range will be included. So if they did take it, that would be an issue. So, but if it was on a counter offer or something removed, then that could potentially change things. Hey, guys. So anyway, yeah, so
Sorry, you're
Go-
saying that if any item in here that is in the contract, the seller doesn't want to leave it, then that's what they counter offer.
you'd have to do a counter. Yep, yep, you got it. All right, we good on section 1.2?
I did have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, let's say they put the refrigerator, but when you listed the property and you have pictures and everything, and there was never a refrigerator. But they said they wanted a refrigerator, you don't have to, right?
Yeah,
'Cause there
so
was
yeah,
never
good
a
point.
refrigerator.
So in section 1.1, it says, unless excluded herein, this sale includes the following items if presently owned and in place on the property. So if they weren't there
Oh.
at the time, then
So they can mark like all of those included, but if it wasn't there, they wouldn't get it. 'cause
that's
it
right.
wasn't there. Okay.
If there was no fridge to begin with and they include the refrigerator, you could, like, you should call and say, hey, you asked for the refrigerator, there's no refrigerator, like, you should talk about it.
Okay.
But yeah, if any of the items are not there, such as a sprinkling system, it's not like the seller then has to go put one in, so. All right, good. All right, so section 1.3 talks about excluded items. The only thing that I will say on this is, here's how I do it. When I'm filling out the contract, if there are specific things, so let's use the hot tub. Let's say maybe they put the hot tub was included, but my buyer is like, I don't want a hot tub. I feel like it just takes up space. They always are breaking down. I don't want it. then that's when I would say put it, if it's something that the buyer specifically is like, I do not want it, put it in the excluded. But let's say there's a swing set that on the MLS, it says the seller will leave the swing set if you want it. And I say to the buyer, do you want the swing set? And they're like, I don't really care. If it's there, great. If it's not, I don't care. Then in that scenario, I probably would not exclude it. But if the buyer said, I don't want the swing set and I want it gone, I would put excluded swing set.
So actually yesterday, this happened. I moved to the house, got my client their keys. And in the excluded, it says that they were taking the dryer. Well, we got there and the dryer was still there, but my clients don't want it there and they want them to remove it. And they just left it, and they're in a different state now. Like, they said, I told them I was gonna remove it for them.
Yeah.
But in that case, can you call up like the seller and say, hey, this is still here, they don't want it, like.
Yeah, if you get, if you had, that's, yeah, so if you had put excluded on there and then you get there and it's there, then I would call the listing agent and say, hey, you need to come and get this out. Or your client needs to come and get it out because it was excluded. We don't want them. So.
Yeah, well, I just moved it.
Did it yourself, yeah, yeah. Something like that, that's just it. Depending on the scenario of what it is, if it's something simple like that, you can, yeah, just, I'll take it for you or whatever, but, yep, good.
But if it's a bathtub,
Yeah, if it's a hot tub, yeah,
they
it's
call
not
you
as
and
easy.
they-
Yeah, then I would be calling the agent saying, hey, we excluded this, we wanted it out. And so that brings up another good point is if it was the hot tub and I wanted it excluded, I would put in there excluded and removed, you know, at closing or something, so that for sure you had it in writing, so. All right, next, water service.
What about
Go ahead.
above 1.3, those two boxes?
Oh, thank you. Sorry, good catch. Is there a problem in section 1.2 on that?
Oh, it's missing a check
Yes.
mark.
Yeah, so it needs to either be checked that there are additional items of personal property or there are not, either way. And if it's checked that there are, then we also need the separate agreement. You look, comment?
No.
Oh, okay. Looked like you wanted to say something. So yeah, thank you, Chad. So on that one, yeah, we should have checked that there are not, probably in this scenario, there are not. All right, water service. On this one, just keep in mind that this is what it says. In the water service section is saying that the purchase price will include any water shares or water rights that are a legal source of the property, okay? So automatically, everything is gonna be included. So unless excluded on that blank line. So just keep in mind, again, that you wanna be talking to the client if there are water shares or water rights, are they planning to include them? Because the contract by default, they're included.
Oh.
Yep. So make sure you have that discussion again. This is another one of those where if you don't, it could come back and haunt you later on. If the clients say, no, we wanted to not include those. So, okay, all right. Next, section 2. Any concerns on section 2.1?
So quick question, Russ.
Yes,
I had a client that had water shares
okay,
and he did not, he said, I will want to leave so many, but the other ones I want them for me. So
just spell it out then. Yep.
okay.
Yeah, if there's something different, spell it out. And in fact, I'll tell you a quick story on that. So, and Britt, I just saw your comments. Thank you for reminding me. I'll probably still tell you again on Tuesday that you need to turn your camera on, so. But she's already done the board, so she just came here where she could really get taught. She, I don't know, is Britt, I don't know, is Britt? My camera hasn't been on. I think it's she, right, Britt? If I'm wrong, I'm sorry. This is one of those scenarios where I should have checked first. So apologize. I don't think we've met in person, but I think she. Anyway, back to section 2.1. Oh, yeah, the story
Yeah,
first.
you were right.
Okay, so my sister called me up one day. Her and her husband own an acre of land up by Midway. And they said, we want to sell our property. Great. So I go up there. I meet with them. I asked them about water shares and water rights. They said, yes, we do have one water share. When we bought the property, you had to buy a water share. You couldn't use any water. But since we've lived here, they have now come through and put in water meters. And so now the first share of water is free, but then if we want to use more than that, we can, we just have to then pay for it. So the new buyer doesn't need a water share, they could just pay for the water use. So I had put on the MLS that it was not included. When we got the offer, it looked just like this, which would mean what? It's included. They were saying we want it included. So I said to my sister, they're asking, here's the purchase price they're offering. They're asking for the water share. What do you want to do? She said, let's tell them we'll sell it to them outside of this, but it's not going to be part of the contract. Great. So I do an addendum, said water share will not be included, but buyer could purchase outside of closing if they're interested. Send it back. They accept our counter offer. They called and said, yes, we'll accept it. And we'll get back to you on the water share if we want to buy it or not. And I said, okay, great. So I told my sister, hey, they'll get back to you if they want to buy it. Okay, time goes on. Right before closing, the buyer's agent calls me and says, hey, the buyer now does want to buy that water share. And I go, okay. So I hang up, call my sister. Hey, they do want to buy the water share. Oh, I already sold it to the neighbor. And I was like, okay, like, why did you not talk to me first? Well, you said they didn't know if they wanted it, and the neighbor said they wanted it, so I sold it to the neighbor. So I had to call back the agent and say, hey, sorry, they already sold it. And, you know, it ended up all working out and being fine because they, you know, could just pay for the water use. But my point in that is, the lesson I learned from that is what I should have told my sister is before you sell it to somebody else, let me know and I'll go back to them and say, we're about to sell it if you don't want it. And so, I mean, they were a little upset, but at the same time, they knew it wasn't part of the contract.
Sorry, not to be disrespectful to your sister,
No,
but
you
when
can't
you are
be.
when you are in the middle of a transaction selling, that there's something in there, I think in my opinion, it's wise to wait until the transaction
Right.
closes. Do you know? what
Yeah,
are you doing?
I agree with you that I think she should have said, I think she should have called me and said, hey, the neighbor wants to buy it. Will you ask them if they want it? And really, she even could have come back and said, here's the, you know, they're gonna have to pay us more than X, so, you know, whatever the neighbor would pay, but anyway. All right, section 2.1, any concerns there?
Yeah, the math is off.
Yes.
Okay, good. Did you have another one?
Yeah,
Okay,
and
what?
the additional earnest money on the next page, there's supposed to be 500, but it might be after.
Okay, good. We'll talk about that when we get to the next
Okay.
section. Okay, so on this, the main thing, here's the thing that I want to make sure that you guys are aware of, is when you're filling out section 2.1, a lot of times agents will just put in their new loan amount TBD, balance of purchase price and cash at settlement TBD. So they put in the earnest money, they put in the purchase price, but then they put TBD in the other things.
So, quick question, doesn't the earnest money go back to the, like, isn't that subtracted from?
The down payment.
Oh, but the
That's
down
a
payment's
flat.
not listed on the offer.
No, right here, balance of purchase price and
Okay,
cash at
so
settlement.
Good job.
Did they miss that? Did they forget to do that on this, or is that just my?
Yeah, well, no, it's just the math was done incorrect.
Okay, okay, great, I'm glad that I figured that out.
Can you
Surprised
break
that I didn't.
that down? That part, because usually like, if I do like the earnest money 1,000 and then additional earnest is 0. But for the new loan, I usually do FHA or conventional on that.
You, what do you mean?
I
You
would
write
write
it?
like FHA as in
Oh,
the.
yeah, no.
Oh, okay, see, okay.
That- that's
Can
good.
you
That's
break
why
it
you're
down
here.
for me, because, and
Yes.
also with the seller finance, I'll
Yep.
be like NA.
Yep.
Not applicable.
Yep.
And then balance at cash price and I put to be determined.
Okay, good.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
which,
if you could-
that's a very normal way that people do it, FYI.
Okay.
Other than, they don't usually put FHA here, but they usually put TBD.
Oh,
Now, so here's the thing that what I want to say to you guys is, I want to train you guys to be better than most agents, okay? So most agents do that, TBD. And it's fine, like, you can do that. But what I want you guys to know is there are scenarios, there are times when you doing it and putting TBD might be the reason you don't get the property. And I'll give you a quick example. I've done a lot of REO properties. I've done a lot of foreclosure homes, helping the bank liquidate and sell the properties. And I have had scenarios where offers came in and people have put TBD, and then, but somebody else has the exact same purchase price, but they've broken down where the money's coming from. The bank will take one that shows that over a TBD because the TBDs, they're like, we don't know what that means. Like, you could
You do
decide
this
whatever
for
you
you.
want, like,
It's
do
a
you
surprise.
have money or not? Now, so I do want to say to you this, though, keep in mind, your buyer can change this any way they want. Meaning they could say, yeah, we're gonna put 20% down, and then they could later on go, yeah, we're gonna go FHA instead. Like, they don't need permission from the seller to change that. So but do your best to put it what is correct. Make sure you are taking the time, just because, again, especially the competitive market we've been in, what the amount of money you're putting as your down payment or this balance of cash at settlement could be the thing that the seller says, okay, I like that offer better because of that. And so by putting TBD, you potentially hurt your client's chance of getting it. Now, probably not every time, but just know that it could make a difference. And
We
I,
had 3 this week that brought them into my office and said, what is this? And I said, it's crap.
Yeah.
I go, how do you know where you're going, what you're doing?
Yeah.
And it was the very reason the offers were not accepted over others. And it might have been a better offer, but even the agents, well, we don't know.
Yeah.
And it would be, putting that in there is,
yeah, take the time to stop and figure out, just asking the client what type of loan and how much are you gonna do as a down payment. And like I say, even if they said, well, we haven't decided if we're gonna do 20 or 25%, then I would say, great, do it at 25% to make your offer stronger. Like, now, what I'm not saying is put down that they're gonna do 50% down, even though they're gonna do an FHA loan. I'm not saying that. Like, put what's real, but if they're unsure, put the better of the unsure here, because it'll make your offer look better.
So when I do that with my clients that are writing an offer, if they say, well, like, we don't know, that's when I'll go in and I will like read them the last sentence of 2.1 and let them know, like, it does not matter.
Yeah.
Like, it does not matter, to your point, like 20 or 25%, it doesn't matter, because it says right at the end of 2.1, any amount shown in 2.1C and 2.1E may be adjusted as deemed necessary by the buyer and the lender.
Yeah.
So
In
like,
Oregon, we have to have
it
this
doesn't,
seller.
it doesn't matter. And so they're, oh, okay, great, you know,
Yep.
so.
And that's why I say,
And so
put the
that's
best
why-
case
That's
scenario.
why the TBD almost doesn't really make sense, because it's already.
Right.
it's already
Specified.
stated.
It's already says you
It's
can
on
determine
here.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. We have to have both parties sign off on any changes.
Any change, yeah,
Which sucks.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Any other concerns there?
Yes.
Questions?
So
Yeah.
can you break it down? So
Oh,
I
yeah,
would do
sorry, I
the,
didn't do
no, you're fine. So the full price is 247, but I would minus 1,000 from that because of the earnest money. Right?
So,
And
so
then-
I'll tell you how I do it. Here's how I do it. Is I say, okay, you want to offer 247,000.
Mhm.
Great. How much are you going to do as a down payment? Or even just for that matter, what type of a loan could be? Because if they say they're getting an FHA loan, I automatically know this is going to be 3.5%. But then I would subtract the earnest money 1,000 from the 3.5%.
Okay,
So just think of it as the earnest money and the balance of purchase price in cash. Those two added together is the down payment.
and then minus that from the full price to get the new loan.
And then, yep, so
Oh,
then I'm
okay,
gonna
that
take
makes
that,
sense.
minus it from here, and that's the loan.
Okay.
Yep.
And then when you add them all, it should.
And then when you add it up, it should all
Oh.
equal. Good job. All right, any concerns on the initials?
What's an FHA is 3%?
3.5.
3.5?
Yeah.
Is that variable or no?
Is what?
Like, can they, I'm asking on an FHA, which I'm not as familiar with, can they get points off of that, or if they put more money down?
Well, they can go.
I mean, excuse me, 3.5 if they, depending on, that's like their down payment, right?
Right,
3.5, with like VA, it's 0
right.
or whatever. I'm saying, like, does that vary based on, I don't know, the site or the price of the home? Excuse me,
Varies on
No.
cash available.
varies on cash available.
Yeah.
Because it's
So like, is it ever 4% down or 3% down, depending on, you know, how
Well,
much the home is or
So
something like
the
that?
answer to your question is yes, but if you have more than the 3.5% down, you probably don't want to do an FHA loan.
Yeah.
they do a 5%
That's the-
convention.
Yeah, you can do it.
Incentive.
If you're gonna do more than that, you probably don't wanna do an FHA loan. So partially, the answer is, it's gonna be 3.5 because that's why they're doing FHA. Otherwise, they would do a different one.
Okay, cause yeah, the one thing is, with the I'm trying to figure out, based on the FHA VA addendum, can you figure out like which it is?
Is it FHA or VA, you mean?
Yeah.
There's a checkbox, checkbox that you have to check on, if it's VA or FHA.
Okay, I was, or is it?
Well, no, there's not one on
Well,
the,
Sometimes,
this-
sometimes there is. though.
Yeah,
You're
because
right,
like the
there
one
is
I
an
just
addendum
found
on
their
the
contract, we had to initial if it was VA or
Specifies.
FHA.
oh, really? That
Yeah.
must be something new, so that's good to know, yeah.
It's a totally different.
Cause it should, cause you're right, cause
Because
otherwise.
there's
how do you
nothing,
know?
yeah, there's nothing on the addendum, so it's ambiguous.
Yeah.
That's why I was kind of
Yeah,
asking.
it sounds like maybe there is a new addendum, so I'll need to go check off to redo my.
Yeah, I mean, I
whole
assume
thing.
it'd be an FHA because then most likely they would probably have VA funding.
The
that
answer's
would be
gonna
rolled
be
into
your
the,
lender's gonna tell you exactly how.
Yeah, I was gonna say, you look at the pre-approvals too. It's totally.
They're gonna tell you what to
every
do.
client.
No, I was talking on the seller side. Because on the seller side, that can come into play, because if it's a VA, then you're like, oh, they're gonna do VA level inspections, which is a whole nother thing.
Yeah.
They're pretty strict.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know.
Okay, good. So, any concerns on that page? Anything else? Initials? Okay, good.
Well, they
All right.
didn't date anything, that's what I was gonna say.
That was timestamp.
Oh,
So the good news is
I'm like,
because
you
of
guys are
the,
so dumb.
yeah, because it was done with Don Luke, we've got the date and time.
Gotcha, okay.
See right at the.
Yep, I do see that now, thank you.
All right.
That's the same one that you do with
Next, section 3.3. Any concerns there?
So on the MLS, it says upon recording, but it says 24 hour, it doesn't matter, right?
Yeah, good. So great question. So again, similar to the refrigerator, the seller, what they put on the MLS is just, here's our request. This is what's gonna take control. So again, this would be, if you're the listing agent, you get the offer in, you would wanna make sure the seller is good with whatever's in there. So.
Just counter it.
So, also on this, there is no right answer of like, should it be 24, 48, 72? Like, I know one agent in the valley here that he puts 7 days on every single, like, if you wrote the offer and on his listing and it came in with 24 hours, he's gonna counter you back 7 days. And his thinking is, he wants the seller to not feel pressured to get out of the property and all that kind of stuff, which that's fine, whatever. But just know it's all negotiable on that, whether you do number of hours or the number of days after recording, either, whatever you want to do. The other thing is that I would say on this, if the property is vacant, I 100% of the time put upon recording. And to some extent, I mean, I'm becoming even more of a fan of just putting upon recording, even if the property is occupied. I'll tell you why when we get to the dates here in a second. So I'll come back to that. All right, next. Any concerns, section 4.2 here, special assessments? There's usually something that comes up on here. And we'll see if you guys bring it up. If you don't, then great. If you do, then I'll.
Always by the seller.
What?
I don't know.
Oh, yeah, for me, if I'm representing the buyer, I always am gonna say seller gets to pay it. Now, the market we've been in the, I may be saying, no, the buyer will do it, but okay, so a lot of times, you guys didn't say it, but a lot of times what people will say when we get to this section is they'll say, it's the home's not in an HOA.
Yeah, I noticed that, but they can still.
But yeah, so keep in mind that the key thing is this says any assessments for capital improvements approved by the HOA or as assessed by a municipality or special improvement district. So just recognize it is possible, even if they're not in an HOA, that the city or the improvement district could come through potentially and do some type of a special assessment. We're gonna change out all of the something, whatever.
I just dealt with this.
Oh, did you? What was it?
We put seller, special assessment to be paid by the seller. We went under contract, there was no special assessment. Before closing, there became a special assessment.
Was it from the HOA or the
From
city?
the, from the
Oh,
HOA.
I thought you had one
Sorry,
that
sorry.
was an HOA. I was gonna be like, good, give me a good story.
I'm sorry, yes, it was from the
Oh,
HOA,
okay.
and before closing. So
Yeah, I had one
went
that,
back to the contract, that, sorry, like,
I had one with my
we haven't
nephew
closed yet.
that was with my nephew down in Orem. the sellers had gotten Utopia, and so when the city went through, anybody that wanted the fiber, I guess Utopia, is it fiber network? I don't know.
Google Fiber.
Well, it's not Google Fiber. This was years ago. This was
Utopia.
Utopia was the company, but they had some type of a thing where that happened. And because of this, and we had put seller, they ended up having to pay it off. So anyway. All right, we good on that? All right, skipping down then here to section 4.3. Any concerns on that one? So if there's a fees due upon the change of ownership. So again, with me, typically, I'm gonna say the seller is gonna pay for it, but again, if it's a competitive situation, you might wanna say we'll split it, or just the buyer will pay it. All right, section 5.
Isn't the seller's brokerage correct?
What?
Back to the MLS.
I don't know what to say.
Or, well, that's the listing agent, and then underneath it says the broker.
I know, but that's just the seller's brokerage, not the broker's name. So I think,
Or,
am I wrong?
No, you're right, you're right.
Okay,
okay,
yeah, so it's just your name and then your brokerage.
And then the brokerage. The contract before this one did say broker.
No, I can see what you mean. It can be a little misleading there, for sure.
Any concerns though in section 5?
Yeah, the buyer check mark is missing on the buyer's
I was
brokerage.
gonna say, we can count on the TC to find that.
Yeah. There's a lot of things wrong with this.
I know.
I love that.
Okay, good. Which, by the way, since she's here, I'll do a little plug for you.
Thanks.
Here's the good news, is if you use the TCs, you don't have to worry about this stuff. I mean, you do, but she will find it for you and go, hey, we need.
Yeah, like, this is it, but by the way.
Yeah.
That's scary.
Did you just snort?
Did I?
I
think that was me.
It was you? Oh, I was gonna say, I've never heard Rick snort.
I was gonna own it, 'cause I didn't know if I did it or not.
I wasn't hearing but
Forwarding ahead here. Any concerns in section, I guess the next one we're filling out section 7. Any concerns there? Okay. Section 8, 8.1. Any concerns there? 8.2. Any concern? Trick you. 8.3.
we missed a trick or you're done?
I don't know, I'm just trying to get you in question. I'm just trying to get in your head.
Right.
No, they have is, and it's required, so that's right.
8.3. Any concerns?
Now I don't know.
All right,
It is required, so it is. I think that's right.
okay. How about 8.3I? Any concerns there?
That's a 0.
All right, so on that 8.3 BI is, what if we had put in there $1,000 or $500? Tell me what that means.
$500. If it's $500, if the buyer decided to cancel or financing or appraisal reasons for the deadline, that $500 would be non-refundable to the
Like the
buyer.
seller.
Okay, good.
Yeah. the seller, right?
Yeah.
Of the 1,000, that's right. So just keep in mind that that's however much you put in there, if the buyer cancels after due diligence, but before finance and appraisal, that's how much goes away. Now, I like the fact that for years, we didn't have that in our contract. The contract is very much built around the buyer being able to cancel and get their money back. This is good because a lot of times what ended up happening is agents would use finance and appraisal as a second due diligence, a way to get out, you still get your client's money back. This way, if there's at least something in there, kind of makes it like, hey, if you cancel after due diligence, there's still some skin in the game.
And I like that you can do it, it's like a variable amount. so
Yeah.
just a couple.
Yeah, rather than the whole thing, so, good. All right, how about section 8.4? I'm glad you came back, because you had the concern on this.
Is it check mark or the check mark on the box, is it wrong? Because,
Just will not.
yeah, well, not, and they're
Well-
$500.
Yep, that's right.
Is it in the wrong section spot?
What do you mean?
Because on the first one it said will not, and this one says will not, but they put 500, so I was thinking maybe the 500 is as like after.
Good. So yeah, so key thing on this is, and you guys are right on, is if we're gonna put $500 there, we should have checked the box of there will be additional $500 deposited. I mean, technically, there would be nothing wrong with saying, we will not give you an additional $500, but that would be kind of stupid to do that, but I mean, you could, because basically the way it's written is just says, we're not gonna give you an additional 500. But yeah, so if you're gonna check will not, then put 0 in there. If you're gonna put will, then put however much it is. But let's say that we had checked the box will, and that it was we'd give an additional $500. At what point do we have to get that then? When is that additional earnest money due?
No later than the due diligence deadline or the financing and appraisal deadline, whichever is later.
Okay, good. So that additional earnest money has to be deposited either by the due diligence deadline or finance and appraisal, and it's whichever one is further out. So you have until whatever the further out date of those two to deposit that additional earnest money, okay? All right, next, section 9.
So there is 2 addendums, and it doesn't have it checked.
Perfect, good. So yeah, we put down that there are, but then we didn't check any of the boxes.
Yeah, or put the number of addendums.
Yep, or the number, good. I guess we did check FHA, we just didn't do the addendum number or put one. Okay, good catch. All right, section 10. Any concerns here? Okay. Yeah, and this is again, depending on market conditions, but as a general rule, this is the way I like to fill it out, is that it will be included, it will be ordered by the buyer, company selected by the buyer, but paid for by the seller. That's how I like to fill it out. I helped my cousin, I got all my stories involve family members for some reason, but I had a cousin that said, hey, I want to buy a property. I went and helped him buy the property. We had filled it out exactly like this, that it would be ordered by the buyer, can be selected by the buyer, paid for by the seller. Listing agent called me up and says, hey, we've already ordered a home warranty, because there are some home warranty companies that will, if the seller will do it and get it in play before they even get an offer, they'll give them seller coverage either for free or whatever. And so they had called and said, hey, we've already ordered one. The seller's already ordered one through this other company. I went back to my cousin and said, hey, they've already ordered through this other company. He's like, I don't care. And I said, okay, so great, let's close. So we close on the property, and we closed in August-ish, somewhere around August. October, it starts to get cold. He goes to turn on the furnace and it won't work. So he calls the home warranty company to come out and fix the furnace. They come out to fix the furnace and they tell him it's got a cracked combustion chamber, and that's not covered by their home warranty. Well, the home warranty company that we would have selected, it would have been covered. They covered the cracked combustion chambers. And so I had to go back to my cousin and say, unfortunately, it's not covered. And I felt really bad, because I was like, if I would have just said, no, we want to use the one we want, it would have been covered. So just kind of know on that, it's all negotiable. Be aware of what it is. I just always feel like, especially when I'm representing the buyer, I want to make sure they're getting a home warranty company that I have a little bit of pull potentially with, that if there is a problem, I can call up the rep who I have a relationship with to be like, hey, look how much we use you and you got to help us out or whatever. And not always is that going to work, but you at least have a chance. So anyway, that's my thoughts on home warranty.
But, sorry, question, in your cousin's case, you couldn't do nothing about it, right?
No, I couldn't do anything about it.
Because they already.
Yeah, they
did
said
it.
that's not included in our home warranty.
No, but what?
Oh, yeah, no, we still could have. I could have gone back and said, no. I could have done a counter offer saying, no, we want to use our home warranty company. And the nice thing is, home warranty companies wouldn't have probably charged that seller. They would have just said, all right, we'll get the next deal. It would have worked out. We could have, if I would have just said, no, we want to use ours, it probably would have been fine.
Oh, so you could have done that.
Oh, yeah, could have. I told my cousin, he was like, I don't care. And at that point in my career, I was like, yeah, I've never really seen home warranty have to be used for much anyway, so
I also found out home warranties don't cover,
anything.
yeah, well, that and, AC unit if the furnace is getting stolen from the property.
Oh, really? If it gets stolen?
Yeah, it was like a week after they moved in, and,
Homeowner should have done that though.
Yeah, your homeowner's insurance should.
yeah, we got, like,
Why would, I have so many.
I don't know, it was in Glendale and.
I was gonna say, people steal the AC for the copper. The
Yeah,
copper.
they stole the
It's
AC
copper.
unit and they broke into the house.
They-
and stole the furnace.
It gets, buys them drugs.
Yeah.
Copper buys people drugs?
Oh,
Yeah.
Copper's worth a lot of money.
I'm sorry.
It's a Utah thing.
She's not right.
No, it's not a Utah thing.
It's in everywhere.
I have-
It's like a Morgan thing too,
I
right?
have, it is, it's
Pretty sure
everywhere.
it is.
I own investment properties in Mississippi and we have to cage the AC because I've had them stolen because they didn't have.
How do you
cage.
not get caught doing that?
You're sneaky.
Just carrying it.
A
Oh
lot
my
of
God.
drugs
Okay,
in your
also,
property or your
is
body.
meth testing
Go at
like
night.
mandatory here?
No,
But is it like standard?
but using meth is man. No.
The
The test, yeah.
Well,
That is
I'd
so
rather give them that.
wrong.
Hey, think about how many more hours of this job you could put in.
I know, right? You could do a ton more.
Fair
than-
point.
No, it's not required.
Yeah, I hadn't heard about that. until I'm here.
Yeah.
I'm learning so much.
All right, any other concerns on that page?
No.
I really am.
Okay, next then, going down, and again, if you have concerns, questions, let me know and I'll hit any of them. Section 15.
Yeah, so the mediation box.
Yeah.
Okay, so, but should it be shall or may?
Shall.
Okay, so I have one for shall.
Shall is like required.
Yep.
You're saying we'll have that.
If you check shall, you're saying we will go to mediation first. So what do you think? Shall or may?
May.
I mean, it
Okay.
depends on your client.
Yeah,
right?
it depends.
Yeah, it's like, I've talked to my clients, I'm like, okay, this is the two options.
Good, that's right, yeah. So I'll tell you quickly, so I used to be with Coldwell Banker, and when I would do this training there, we had an attorney on staff. And the first attorney that we had on staff, when I was teaching this, I said, how should I teach this section? And he said, teach it that they want to do shall. And I was like, okay, so I came into class and I'd be like, okay, guys, we need to do shall. When you're with your clients, tell them to do shall. Well, then that attorney left and we got a new attorney and he was like sitting in the class and I said, okay, you should do shall. And he was like, hold on. No, you should teach that your client should check the box that says may. So then I was like, okay, so then I'd come into class and be like, all right, guys, we should check the box that says
New
may.
information.
Then that guy left and we got a new one and he came in and said, wait, what Parker said, which is explain to them what it means and then let them decide. So that's the way I teach it now is you should tell the clients, if you check the box shall and there's a dispute, we have to go to mediation. If you do may, then it's just if you want to or not. Now,
There's a strong argument both ways.
there's, yeah, and so here's for me, how I think about it. Based on just my experience in real estate, if I were doing this and filling this out for myself, I'm probably gonna check the box of may. But here's why I say that. What do you think most disputes on this contract end up being over what? Well, no, but specifically, what on the contract? Earnest money. Most disputes that we have in real estate are who gets the earnest money, most of the time. And so typically, if you end up going to mediation, the company is going to use the earnest money to pay for that mediation. So if it was $1,000 when you go to mediation, you might chew up most of that earnest money. So for me, I would probably do may. But now the flip side of that, which is where Rick said there's a strong argument, in the event that it was like something major, I would wish I had checked shall. So at the end of the day, it's like to your client, do you want to say shall or do you want to do may? Do you
Well, I
want the
mean,
option or do you want to say yeah?
even if you do shall mediation, and then I believe it even says it in 15, mediation can create no binding decisions.
Correct. Yeah, it might not.
So I mean,
need
even
to
if
be.
you force someone to go to mediation, if they don't want to do mediation, even though they're required, they could be like, well, I'm not gonna stick with any.
Correct,
So
but you
that-
still have, but if you try to go to court, a judge is gonna say, have you done mediation? Because the contract said you have to. So you gotta go do it.
So I
So,
mean, you gotta go do it, but if they're gonna be like relatively non-participatory, then like.
right.
you know.
Yep. So just know on that, explain to your client, shall means you have to, may means you can decide later on. And either way, you could end up wishing you had done the other. Like, that's probably the way to say it to the client. So throw a dart and see what you hit. All right. I'm joking. Any concerns on this page? Anything else?
The buyer's initials.
Buyer initials.
Okay, good. I thought I was tricky, but I didn't. Okay, good. So yeah, so here's the thing on this. Now, thankfully, because of dot loop, we don't end up missing them as much. I don't know, you tell me, do you see agents missing them
What, initials?
initials?
Oh, yeah. all the time.
Okay, because I was gonna say, before, I think it's less than before we had dot loop. When
Yeah.
everybody was doing this
That's true.
by hand, it got missed a ton. So here's the point for me on this. Before you submit your contract, before you submit it to the seller, if you're the buyer filling it out, just do a glance through, scroll through and look, did the client's initial everywhere they were supposed to initial? Okay, that's kind of my point of that. All right. Next, section 24. Any concerns there? Okay, well, let's talk about though how you may want to do this. So there's not a right or a wrong way necessarily. I mean, there probably is a wrong way, but there's not one right way. But as far as seller disclosure deadline, for me personally, I'll tell you how I typically do this. Is seller disclosure deadline, I usually will put it 3 to 5 days out from the day I'm writing the contract. And how I decide that is, for me, I usually look at it as, if I feel like we're given a pretty straightforward offer that, hey, they're probably just gonna accept it, I'm probably gonna put 3 days. But if I'm like, hey, remember I said I always call and talk to the listing agent? If I called and talked to the listing agent, one of the other questions I always ask them is, how much time do you need? So I know we're on section 24, but section 25 is how much time you're gonna give them to respond or to accept. Well, I always say, how much time do you need? In the event that they said, oh, my client's hard to get a hold of, he's a fireman and he works, whatever, has 48 hours that he's on and then he's off or whatever. Like, if there was something like that where I'm like, okay, I'm gonna have to give him a little more time, I probably would do a little more time on my seller disclosure deadline as well. So that's how I usually think, 3 to 5. I know some people teach it as saying just put 7 days, and that's fine too. But for me, I typically do 3 to 5, okay? Due diligence deadline, I typically am gonna do somewhere in 10 to 14 days. And again, on that same concept, I usually think of it as, how quickly are we gonna be able to get to those things and what makes the most sense? If I'm on the listing side, I want the due diligence to be as short as possible. If I'm on the buy side, I want it to be as long as possible. I've just found somewhere in 10 to 14 usually is acceptable to both parties. So I usually do that. Finance and appraisal deadline on this, again, this will change based on the market that we're in. But as a general rule, if I look over my 25 plus years of doing this, as a general rule, the way I do finance and appraisal is remember back in section 3.3, I think it was, where we talked about possession. When I get to that section, the first thing I ask my client is, when do you want to move in? And I find out the date they want to move into the property, and then I'm going to base everything on this off of that. So let's say that they said, let's do a more current time frame here. Let's say that they said to me, we want to move in the end. So let's just say over the 4th of July weekend, we want to be on July 2nd. Okay. Then for me, before I put in finance and appraisal deadline, I figure out when the settlement deadline is going to be. So if they wanted to move in on July 2nd, I would then be backing it up from that of saying, okay, from when they sign, it has to happen within 4 days after they've signed, that it has to fund and record. So for me, I'm looking at that saying, okay, typically it's going to fund and record the next day after they sign, almost always, most of the time. But just know there are scenarios where it might take an extra day or two or whatever. So because of that, I would be looking at it saying if they wanted to move in on July 2nd and we had put 24 hours on section 3.3, the possession section, well, then that means that that has to have been funded and recorded by July 1st. Right? Well, so that means we probably could sign on June 30th. But what if there is a hesitation or whatever, it takes an extra day? So for me personally, here's how I like to think of it. I usually put my settlement deadlines on a Monday or a Tuesday if they want to move in on Saturday. Now, here's why I usually do that. If they knew, so let's say we were going to go sign on June 27th, and it's probably going to fund and record on the 28th, and they can now get the keys on the 29th. When is the seller probably going to move out? If they know they have to give up possession of the property on the 29th, which is a Wednesday, when are they probably going to move out?
27, 28, 29.
Yeah, typically the weekend before is what I've found. So that's why I like doing the closing or settlement on Monday or Tuesday, is I've found a lot of times the seller will do most of their moving. If you do it on a Monday, they're probably going to do most of their moving on Saturday and Sunday before they go in and sign. Is the buyer ever going to complain if you gave them the keys earlier? If they are expecting to move in on July 2nd, are they going to complain if you give them the keys on the 29th? No. But if you're supposed to move in on the 2nd and for whatever reason you did settlement on the 30th and it got pushed out then till the 1st, so now they can't move in until Monday or Tuesday, is your buyer going to complain?
With a holiday week.
Yeah, with the holiday, yeah, you're right. But I mean, you get my point, hopefully, is what I have found is your client is very rarely going to complain if you get them the keys early. But if you get it to them after, if they've already planned to move on the 2nd and they can't move until the 5th now because of the holiday, they're going to be like, hey, we got our people lined up or the movers lined up and all that kind of stuff. So for me, if I knew we were going to do their settlement deadline on June 27th, I'm probably then going to put my finance and appraisal deadline. What is the lender required in terms of disclosures before they can sign? Do you remember?
3 business days.
3 days. And does Saturday count or not count?
No.
Does Sunday count or not count? Saturday does count, Sunday doesn't.
Oh, okay.
So for me, I just back it up from there, basically the 3 days. So I probably would be saying, if we were going to sign on Monday, I'm going to put my finance and appraisal deadline as the Thursday before. Because they're going to have to have gotten the disclosures out. So again, this could vary based on the market. I want to be real clear on that. Like the market we've been in, I maybe wouldn't have tried to do it that way, but where I think we're headed to, I would go back to, I want to protect that earnest money as long as I can. So I'm going to put their finance and appraisal deadline being the Thursday before signing the settlement deadline on the Monday. That make sense? Questions? All right. Offer and time for acceptance. We already talked about on this one. I always call and ask, how much time do you need? And if they said I could get you, if I was calling somebody right now, hey, I'm writing an offer, sending it to you. So Chad, how quickly can you get with your clients to get me an answer?
We're going to be reviewing this evening.
Okay, great. So then I'm going to probably give him until 10 o'clock tonight to give me an answer. If he said, like, let's go back to my client's a fireman and he's working, and so I don't know if I can get to him until tomorrow afternoon, then I'm probably going to give him till 5 or 6 tomorrow night. Like I always call to say, how much time do you need? And I want to keep it as short as I can. Now, here's why.
I was gonna say, do you ever want to like give them a more tight deadline? Because if you know you have a good offer, but you don't want them to sit there and play the field for the next
And I want
day and try to conjure up other offers, then you're like, hey, look, this is like go or no go, like,
Yep.
yeah, take
Yeah.
a shot or not.
And as an agent who's done a ton of listings, I always, if you give me an offer, I am immediately on the phone calling every other agent that showed the property recently saying, we just got an offer. If your people are interested, let us know. It is amazing how many times you can generate a second offer by doing that. So yes, 100%. That's why when I'm on the buy side, I'm calling and saying, how quickly can you get me a response? And then I'm giving them only that long to try to go play the field to get an offer. All right. Any other concerns on that page? All right, the FHABA loan addendum. Any concerns up here at the top?
The address.
Okay, good. They missed the address on there. Good. Any other concerns on section 1?
Yeah, the two of us back here discussed it's an old form, so.
So there is a newer version.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there is,
And
it
I gotta
actually
go redo
delineates
this.
whether or not it's FHA or.
So I gotta
And
redo
it's
this
nice,
thing.
because then you know it's like a game.
Yeah,
That is good. It just means I gotta redo this paperwork now.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit longer too.
it is, yeah, it's like 3 pages, I think.
Oh, is it?
It's
Okay,
like
good to know.
detailed.
Well, and FYI, I did after our class on Tuesday, I went back and fixed the new seller disclosure. So the new packet has that. So I'll have to do that with this next. All right, how about section 3? Section 4. Section 5. Let me just say one thing back on section 4, actually. Because I don't know if this still is confusing to agents, but it used to be. And a lot of times agents think that section 4, the amount that you put in there is just to get a termite inspection. That's not what this is. This is saying in the event you did one and found that there were termites, you would spend up to X amount of dollars to get rid of them.
Yeah.
So do we have termites in Utah?
Yes.
Okay, good. Because a lot of times people think, no, we don't. And so I've never had a transaction that did have termites that we had to deal with, but I've had 2 times that we did a termite inspection and the inspector came back and said, I saw evidence of termites, but it was, both of them were in properties that that had a like a shelf basement in like sugar house area where there was dirt. And so it was just like a piece of wood sitting on the dirt. One was cardboard, the other was like a 2x4 that they said, if you just get rid of that, then you're fine. So anyway, just FYI, a lot of times people think, and your clients will say, oh, we don't have termites in Utah, but we do. Just not prevalent.
They're the worst.
Yeah, were they prevalent in Oregon?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, we don't, thankfully, we don't run into it much. All right,
So-
any,
I did have a question.
yes,
So for the FHA addendum, there's missing a number, right? I'm pretty sure you put like a addendum number.
yeah, the new
This
one
is the
does
old
have
one.
a line.
Oh, this,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, the old one
Yeah,
doesn't.
the new one you put.
It's misleading.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's
which is
weird.
great.
Correct.
That is super weird.
Yeah, it is. I don't know.
All right, any other concerns on the FHABA then? Okay, let's move on then. How about addendum 1? Any concerns here?
Address.
Okay, address again?
The
Yeah,
verbiage on 1.
Okay, what about it?
Well, I mean, I would never write that because that's just like a bogus sentence. It doesn't sound very legal. So it's like seller to have carpets professionally cleaned to remove the stinky, nasty smell, or cat urine. Not even of cat
I
urine
know.
or cat urine. So first of all, like, I would get rid of all the adjectives there in the sentence.
Yeah,
So stinky
good.
and nasty.
Good.
I don't even
And,
think you really need to refer to the smell. You could probably just be like, have the carpets.
No, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
Have
like
it
a room.
professionally cleaned, and then I would say to remove any trace of urea possibly left by
Yeah.
pets.
Yeah, and I probably wouldn't even necessarily go that far, but you could. So yeah, here's the main thing. What you don't want to do is offend somebody in it. And so my point in putting that in there was just for me to have the discussion with you guys of, number 1, if there is an addendum that already covers what you're talking about, use that. In fact, that is something that the division could come down on you for if you went and created your own version of an addendum that already exists, which that isn't in this case, but for example, if you were doing like subject to the seller getting their property sold or buyer relocation or whatever, like there's an addendum for that, you shouldn't just write it in yourself. You should go use the addendum. Second thing is, yeah, don't put stuff in there that is going to be confusing or whatever. And so what I recommend is if you are going to fill out an addendum, a blank one, and put in details, ask somebody else to read it, because it makes sense to you when you wrote it, but somebody else reading it might be like, I don't understand what you're trying to say here. And so have another agent read it to say, does what I'm saying make sense? because it might make sense to you, but they might get it and think something totally different, okay? And then the last thing on this is I'll tell you real quick, a funny story about an agent. So when I was at Coldwell Banker and running their training program, these classes that I would do, there was other stipulations besides just the class. And so like when somebody had started in that program, they came into the program and you couldn't get out of it. And that makes it sound bad, but you couldn't get out of this program until you had finished all the classes and had 6 closings. And so basically what it meant, which this wasn't necessarily a bad thing, like I said, but it meant they had to come, we would once a week, we would do an accountability session with all the people. They had to show up every week to say, this is what I'm going to do this week. And then they had to show up to say either I did it or I didn't do it every week. So kind of think of it as like Weight Watchers where you have to go get on the scale. It was kind of, you had to come get on the scale every single week. Well, this agent it was an agent up in Park City. So this wasn't a relative. Thank goodness. I got a story that's not a relative. But this guy was in the training program. And when he had submitted a contract, I also reviewed every one of their contracts before it was approved. And so I'm reviewing this guy's contract and I'm flipping through and I get to the addendum 1. And it says in there, it's written in there, buyer and seller agree that this closing will graduate this guy. And then he put in his name, will graduate him from the training program. And then they had signed it. So I went and found my assistant and I was like, well, it looks like we have to graduate him, like, because the buyer and seller agreed, like, I don't know what the heck he was doing with that, but just to tell, I tell you that story so that I can tell you this part of the story. Just don't do weird stuff and don't be weird, I guess, but here's what happened. So fast forward a few years, well, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, even reading this sentence, it just, yes, it can be like hurtful to the seller, but that speaks a lot about you as an agent type thing. Like,
Yeah.
that's a mere, like, wow.
You suck.
Yeah.
Also, it's just not well defined.
Yeah.
So like, even if that was,
Yeah,
normal, it's just like, it's not.
I just think the bigger thing is like, it gives a poor reflection of you and who you represent. you
Yeah.
know?
So fast forward now about 3 years. And we get a phone call into the office and somebody comes to me and says, hey, we've got a past client on the phone who has a complaint and they want to talk to you. Okay. So I get on the phone. Hey, this is Russ and how can I help you? They said, hey, so we bought a home that you guys had listed a few years ago. And I said, okay. And they said, and we just had this weird guy come and knock on our door. And he said that he was the listing agent when we bought the home 2 or 3 years ago, whatever it was. And he was just in town and wanted to know if he could take a shower at our house.
What?
And they were like, and I'm like, well, what did you tell him?
Yeah.
He said, well, we told him no, but like, we just wanted you to know that like, he's very unprofessional. And I was like, yeah, he's not with us anymore as an agent. And you're right. He is very, like, he was just weird.
So it
Does
was an
that?
agent, it really was like.
Oh, yeah. As soon as she told me who it was, I was like, I could see him doing that. That's- He was like, I'm just in town and I need somewhere to take a shower real quick. And
He's
I
like, I
wonder.
did it when your house was listed, why can't I do it?
Yeah.
I wonder if he played the numbers and just hit a bunch in the area and then eventually got a shower.
Probably.
You know,
Who
one out
knows?
of 10 will let you use the lavatory.
Well, yeah, but not to shower. I don't know. Anyway, all right. Any other concerns on this addendum?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, Alex, you got
On the time,
it. Good.
would you want to be, I would imagine you want to be consistent, because it's like, if I'm a selling agent, I'm like, I see that and that's the last addendum, like, oh, hey, we have until 9, but all the others say 8. I mean.
So good. So what would be the correct thing then? In the event that the purchase contract says 8, the FHA VA addendum, let's say that it was, the FHA VA addendum was number 1 and this one was number 2. And FHA VA said 8, and then addendum number 1 here says, or 2 here says 9.
It wouldn't really matter though, right?
So which time then is your offer and time for acceptance? Is it 8 or 9?
On the contract.
It's what?
On the contract.
Yeah.
On the REPC, yeah.
So it's what you guys are saying, it's what the
Actually,
REPC says? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, but it would depend if they accept it or counter it, whatever they accept on.
But how much time do they have? Do they have to do it by 8 PM or 9?
Oh, it's different for
There's
each
something
document.
on the
Well,
website
It'd
that
be 8
says
for the
all,
REPC and then 9 for this one.
there's something on the website that says like all addendums moving forward are also the same or something.
So actually, right here, so let's look at it, it's right here, it says, to the extent the terms of this addendum modify or conflict, which, so that would be the case, right, they conflict
Okay.
with any provisions of the REPC, including all prior addenda and counteroffers, these terms shall control.
Oh,
So is it
it's
8 or
this
9?
one.
9. So it's the last
Except for
one that
there's
you're right.
one caveat to that,
Of course there is.
this one's not signed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I know.
Or, yeah,
Yeah.
check.
So,
Yeah,
okay,
it's about-
so, but here's the thing, I know that makes it way confusing, just know, whichever one is last, the addendum that is last. If, and in this case, since the time was 8 on the other two and it's 9 on this one. Because of what that verbiage says, to the extent that this modifies or conflicts, this one controls. So is it 8 or 9?
9.
9.
9.
If
my-
it was signed.
But I'm curious then, so like from a standpoint, like OA, if they sign passed on the REPC, it's okay as long as they sign before 9.
Correct.
What?
Wow.
Because
Wow.
the offer and time for acceptance changed on,
With
because of
this.
this one from
Because
8
of
o'clock
this.
till 9 o'clock.
Okay.
Now, the key
No.
thing really on that though, if you really, if we get really technical on it, it's hard to know because this one was initialed. I mean, if it wasn't signed and wasn't initialed, I would say it's still 8 o'clock because this wasn't ever
Right, it's
signed.
not
Yeah.
forced, yeah.
But because this one was initialed, so then you would have to, so to answer your question, ultimately you'd have to look at and say, is this a prior? Because it says all prior addenda or counteroffers. Is this one the prior or is the other? Which, and then because in this scenario, this one isn't numbered. Like which one did come first? They were both signed at the exact same time. So this one makes it very, very confusing. But in the event this one was done, this last one, let's say, and I wish when I did this that I would have not signed this one until 10/28. Because then we could have said, okay, well then clearly this one was after. So, but just know, the main thing I wanted you guys to take away from it is to the extent the terms of this addendum modify or conflict with any prior, the terms of this one control.
Even
That's
if it's a
be-
different day too, then, right?
Yep.
so that's because you sent all of it together? Is that-
Correct, yeah, yeah,
Okay.
so I guess that's a good point of what you're saying, is if we had sent the initial one at one particular time and then later sent this one, as long as well, I don't know if that would even matter actually, as I'm saying that. Yeah, if I had sent it and then an hour later sent this one over, the time, we've also now changed the time from 8 to 9, so it'd still be 9.
So before they accept anything,
Yep.
and you just have to send all those over.
Correct, yeah, as long as this got there before they accepted anything,
Wow, that's so interesting.
then it would, because to the extent the terms of this addendum modify or conflict,
Oh.
this one controls. Make sense?
Yeah.
All right. Any other questions, thoughts, comments, concerns? All right. Well, thank you for being here. So Tuesday will be the buyer packet. So